Well, hello. We are here and we are live and we are talking about decision making. So, why is decision making so important that we're actually having a whole YouTube live video about it? I'm using my Wednesday wisdom to talk about this because it's a skill that we don't often directly teach our kids, and yet they really need. It's when we sit down and we think about really big decisions we're making, buying a house, buying a car, where we live, taking a new job, we often put some more time and intention and direct effort into those thoughts. And that's great. But the small day-to-day options, the small day-to-day decisions that you do you know how you make those choices? And if you don't know how you make your choices, then how do you teach your kids to make good decisions? Yet, that is a phrase we talk to our kids about all the time. I want you to make a good decision. I want you to make good choices. Make a good decision. Make good choices. We talk to them about it, but do we ever teach them how to do it? Probably not. So let's change that. If we want our kids to do something well, let's teach them how to do it. You in with me? Okay, great. So the very first step in teaching our kids how to make good decisions is to think about, how do you make decisions? So let's take, for example, what to make for dinner or what to eat for dinner if you're going to order in or someone else is cooking it. But what's for dinner? How do you make that decision? Well, the very first thing is you need to know that you have the question. You need to know that there is a decision that needs to be made. I think that's the first step. Do you agree? Yeah? Thumbs up? You agree with that? Okay. So we recognize there's a decision to be made. What are we going to make for dinner? Then, how do you make that decision? And each person who watches this video will have a unique way to do it. So I'm going to name a few options. One is you just go with your gut or your intuition, whichever word you would use. But you're just like, we're going to have pizza tonight. Or you're just like, I really feel like spaghetti and meatballs, so we're going to do it. There's kind of that instinctual, oh yeah, we're just going to do this. That gut check answer. Some decisions are made that way. Great, that's one option. Two, you already had a plan. You have a schedule of what's happening each night for dinner. So you say, what's for dinner tonight? It's Wednesday night, therefore we're going to use this meal. Great, you have a plan. Maybe you look for the resources you have. It's a third option, right? You open the fridge, you check the pantry, what food do we have at home today? What do we have enough of so that I can make enough for the whole family? What are we doing? That's another option. Maybe you're going to go do some research. You're going to look online for a recipe. You're going to go through a cookbook. You'll do some research to make the decision. Or maybe a fifth option of how you make a decision is maybe you're going to talk to somebody. Maybe you have a partner that you both co-create meals with. You're going to ask them, what should we make for dinner for the family? Or you're on the phone with a friend and you say, I'm thinking about dinner. What should I do tonight? That joint conversation. So there are lots of different ways that you could make that decision. You think through it. One of those ways. And then you pick one option, right? So often, except for the gut check, except for that instinctual decision, everything else has options that you're going to think through the options, the possibilities, consider probably the amount of work it's going to take to do it, and then you pick one. And that's actually the decision-making moment, when you pick the option you're going to move forward with. And that moment, when you actually make the decision, you make it like that. Why do I highlight that piece? Because I want you to recognize that making a decision, there's a whole bunch of prep work before, there's a whole bunch of prep work after, but an actual decision is made in a moment. You get all the information together and then you decide. It's important that we remember that, because sometimes kids and adults will say they're not good decision makers. It's not that they're not good decision makers, it's that they don't know how to collect and synthesize the right amount of information in order to make a decision. Sometimes we get too much information, sometimes we get too little information, and it becomes complicated. We want to simplify by really thinking about how we make choices and then moving forward with it. Okay, so just think about, how did you make your plan for dinner last night? Maybe you let somebody else make the choice. That's another option. So what I want you to understand is that there are lots of ways to make a decision. Some of them are better than others for different scenarios. Writing a pros and cons list for what's for dinner may be a little more time consuming than is worth the actual meal. But think about, how do you in general do that? Now, the second piece of decision making that I want to make sure we talk about is, once you know how you do it, I encourage you to talk through that to your kids. Not in a, this is how you make decisions, the way we're doing this video, but in the moment of, oh, I'm figuring out what's for dinner. Talk it out loud. If your kids are nearby, if they're in, an adjacent room, but can hear you, or they're sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while you're thinking this through, talk it out loud so that they hear it. Or at the dinner table, say, I really thought about what we were going to have for dinner. And so I looked in the cabinet to see what we had and realized we had so much of this chopped meat. And I thought meatballs would be perfect. Check the cabinet. We had spaghetti and we had sauce. So I was in. Done. You've now explained to them the executive functioning you went through to decide how to make this meal, and then went and did it. Now they have a model of what decision making looks like. It's more likely that they will use that model to make decisions in the future. Now, outside of modeling, there are lots of other ways we can help our kids learn to make good decisions. So one is supporting them with choices. Now, as a parent, I am guessing there are lots of different ways and lots of different moments where you have heard about giving your kid choices. All of those are valid. Now, here's another option. When you give your kids a choice, do you want to have spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, or do you want to have hamburgers? Because, you have all that chopped meat in your fridge, apparently, in my made-up scenario. You're giving them options. And if your child comes back to you and says, well, actually, I want spaghetti squash with a meat sauce, you might say, oh, that's really interesting. How'd you get to that decision? That wasn't one of the options I gave you. How'd you get there? That curiosity of engaging your kids of, how did you think of that? How did you come up with that decision? As opposed to simply saying, that's not one of the choices. Now, you may have seen, I am a big believer that kids, if you are giving your kids choices, that they should pick one of those two choices. Otherwise, make it an open-ended question and just ask them what they want to eat for dinner. That is still true. And when your kid gives you another option that wasn't one of the ones that you gave them, rather than just saying, no, that wasn't one of your choices, be curious first. Engage with them and say, oh, that was really interesting. How'd you come up with that idea? And then you have a decision to make. Do you then say, oh, I didn't think about it that way. That's a great idea. Let's do it. And you incorporate it. Or you can say, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't think about it that way. We'll do that another time. But tonight, spaghetti and meatballs or hamburgers, which one would you like? So you can go either way, but that curiosity helps engage and honor your child's thought process, which is awesome. So when you give your kids choices, talk to them about how they decided which of those choices they want to follow through on. Okay? And then when there are other big decisions, which friend do they want to have a play date with, or what toy do they want to play with in their bedroom, or which set of pajamas do they want to wear? All of these are really important decisions that happen day to day for your child. Ask them, well, which one do you want? What are you going to do? What game should we play? And when they make that decision, ask them, how did you know? How did you decide on that? Be curious with them about what their process was. One option. The other option is if your kid does what many kids do and went, I don't know, because they don't always know. Say, okay, well, let's think about how we're going to decide. Often parents will then put in scaffolding to help them make the decision. I want you to sometimes put in scaffolding to help them make the decision. So rather than narrowing it down to options, which is a great choice if you just want to get the decision made, what if you said, well, how can we make a better choice? We could narrow down the options. Well, do you want to pick 2 toys to choose from, or should I? Do you want to pick 2 sets of pajamas to choose from, or should I? So that it becomes easier and easier for them to narrow down what their options are. Yeah? Make sense? Because then they understand the process of how to make the decision, not just diving into the decision. Because both are important skills, but sometimes you need to help them make the decision. Okay, so now that you know how to model good decision making, how to teach your kids how to make that decision, The third and final piece that I want you to think about is to model multiple ways to make a choice for your child. We don't just always go on gut instinct. You might prefer that. It might be the easiest way that you make a decision, but sometimes you weigh the pros and cons in your head. Sometimes you do research and check out what's available. If we're picking 2 games, knowing what's in the cabinet is super helpful. So sometimes looking at that is going to be what you do. So make sure that you are modeling multiple ways for your children to make decisions so that they have a variety of possibilities anytime they have a choice. But teaching them how to do that in all of these different moments will make them really good decision makers. Because sometimes kids just have a hard time making decisions, and we want that to be a skill that they're strong at. Got it? Sound good? Okay. If there is a scenario that you are thinking about that you're like, yeah, but I still don't know how to help my kid make this decision, or I don't know how I make this decision, please put it in the comments or reach out to me directly so that I can help you learn how to make those decisions. If you have another question that you would like answered on these Wednesday Wisdoms, please put it in the comments below or reach out directly, because I would love to make sure that you are getting the support with your parenting questions. If we haven't met before, I'm Dr. Marcie. Thank you for being here and listening and learning with me, because I know that your time is precious. And remember, you are amazing and can do hard things. I'll see you next time.